The blackened figure stood motionless in the darkness, its face completely obscured. Where its mouth should have been, a voice emerged from the void. How was it? The words sent ice through my veins. Behind me, I could hear my friends retching in terror. Then the thing that had once been my childhood friend threw back its head and screamed. It didn't work. It didn't work at all. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you how we got to that nightmare moment. This happened a few years ago, when I reunited with my middle school friends to dig up the time capsule we had buried together. Back in middle school, there were 4 of us who always hung out together: myself, Marcus, Simon, and Derek. On graduation day after the ceremony ended, we gathered at Marcus's house and buried a time capsule under a small tree in his backyard. We made a promise: when we turn 25 we'll all come back and open it together. We went to different high schools but stayed in touch for a while. Eventually, family circumstances scattered us across different cities. Only Marcus remained in our hometown of Numazu. In Japan, Numazu is a small coastal city known for its traditional atmosphere and close-knit communities where everyone knows each other. Marcus was the sentimental type who cried when we all moved away. Gradually, we lost contact with each other. About 10 years later, Marcus suddenly called me out of the blue. "Hello? Hey, it's Marcus from middle school. Do you remember me? Oh, long time no see. What's going on all of a sudden?" Well, I turned 25, so I thought we should all get together and dig up that time capsule. That sounds good, but what about the others? I already contacted everyone else. To be honest, I had completely forgotten about the time capsule from middle school. But Marcus's call brought back all those memories immediately. We arranged to meet 3 weeks later on a Saturday. I was excited about seeing the 3 of them again after so long. On the appointed day, I returned to Numazu for the first time in 10 years, feeling quite thrilled. We had agreed to meet in front of our old middle school in the evening. I was so eager that I arrived at Numazu station in the morning, with plenty of time to spare before our meeting. I decided to walk around town and revisit some nostalgic places. The town had barely changed at all, which was surprising. The park where the 4 of us used to play and the old candy store were still there, exactly as I remembered them. It felt like traveling back in time. Nostalgia and joy welled up in my chest. While walking through town, I spotted a ramen shop that my family had visited once when I was a child. I decided to have lunch there. The old sliding door rattled and clattered loudly as I pushed it open. The empty restaurant greeted me as I stepped inside, feeling a bit awkward. I sat at the counter and placed my order, but the owner never looked my direction. He didn't even respond to my order, just started silently preparing what I assumed was my ramen. This struck me as rather eerie. I quickly slurped down the ramen when it arrived, paid my bill, and left the shop immediately. After leaving the ramen shop and walking for a while, I suddenly noticed the sun had begun to set. The sky had turned completely orange with evening light. My sense of time feels off. Maybe I've been working too much. Thinking this, I hurried toward the meeting place at our old middle school. 3 people were already gathered in front of the school gate. They hadn't changed much, so I recognized them immediately. "Hey, you're late," Simon said. Sorry, I was taking a walk and lost track of time." "You haven't changed a bit either," Derek replied. "Well, now that we're all here, should we go grab some drinks first?" Right after meeting up, Simon, Derek and I started chatting excitedly. But Marcus remained completely silent. "Hey Marcus, what's wrong? We don't have much time. Let's dig up the time capsule first," Marcus said. Marcus spoke with an expression of desperate urgency. Sensing something was troubling him, I stopped the other 2 from heading to the bar, and suggested we go to Marcus's house first. On the way, we exchanged contact information with each other, but Marcus said he didn't use Line, a popular Japanese messaging app similar to WhatsApp, and didn't even have a cell phone. "That's impossible. we exclaimed in surprise. The landline at home still works, so call me there if you need anything, he replied curtly. When we arrived at Marcus's house, it looked exactly the same as when we used to play there as kids. We were delighted. The slightly larger traditional Japanese house had the charm of something that might appear in My Neighbor Totoro, a famous Studio Ghibli film about children living in rural Japan. As we stood outside admiring Marcus's house and reminiscing, I noticed something odd. Even though evening had passed and it was completely dark, there were no lights on anywhere in the house. I wondered if anyone was home, feeling slightly uneasy, but since we were caught up in nostalgic conversation at the time, I decided not to mention the lack of lights. While we stood in front of the house excitedly talking about old memories, Marcus ignored us completely. He walked silently into the yard without a word. His intense, almost frantic demeanor had been bothering me, so I called out, "What's wrong?" But he just ignored me. Marcus stood in front of the tree where we had buried the time capsule. He immediately dropped to his knees and began frantically clawing at the earth with his bare hands. Using only his hands, he desperately dug up the soil. Marcus's behavior was so bizarre that we stood there frozen in shock. In the darkness after the sun had set, the scraping and scratching sounds of his frantic digging echoed eerily through the night. We stood there stunned, watching Marcus's strange behavior. Suddenly, I felt the presence of cold, human-like figures surrounding us. Not just one or two people, but countless presences. I was certain they weren't normal humans, but something terrifying. In the darkness, I could barely make out Simon and Derek's faces. They seemed to sense the same presences, their eyes filled with fear. Only Marcus continued digging relentlessly. Then suddenly, the digging sounds stopped. Complete silence enveloped our surroundings. Simon's shadow rustled as he pulled what appeared to be a smartphone from his pocket and illuminated the area. In the light appeared Marcus, holding a dirt-covered box. The box seemed to be the time capsule we had buried 10 years ago. Looking at Marcus's face dimly lit by the phone light made me feel sick. His expressionless, emotionless eyes stared blankly at us. His face and gaze remained completely motionless as Marcus held out the box toward us. No one spoke. It was utterly quiet. We silently competed over who would take the box, and somehow it fell to me. As I reached for the box, in the faint light I thought I could see that Marcus's fingernails appeared to be torn off. I gasped. I carefully took the box and looked toward the other two. Their faces seemed to say, "You open it." Succumbing to their silent pressure, I placed my hands on the box's lid. No one spoke a word. I felt that if I broke this silence, the cold presences drifting around us would start moving. The time capsule opened easily. Despite having been buried for 10 years, Simon cautiously illuminated the contents. In the lit box I could see a heavily modified eraser that we used to use for our eraser battles. A common game among Japanese students where they flick erasers to knock opponents' erasers off the desk. The sight brought back nostalgic feelings. But what caught my eye wasn't the eraser. It was a photograph placed on top of everything else. The photo showed all four of us making peace signs with our fingers. I had a dim memory of putting it in there. Since there didn't seem to be anything frightening inside, I felt relieved and reached into the box to take the photograph. As I moved the phone light to look at each face in the photo, I almost smiled at our youthful expressions. Then something began changing in the photograph. Marcus's feet at the edge of the photo started turning black. Like spilled paint spreading, the blackness crept upward, continuing its invasion. Soon Marcus's entire body in the photograph had turned completely black, as if burned. What is this?" Until then I had hesitated to speak. But this time the words just slipped out, following my lead. Simon and Derek also let voices escape. "That's disgusting. This makes no sense. What are you trying to pull? What is this?" I demanded of Marcus. My fear seemed to transform into anger. Perhaps I felt relieved that the cold presences surrounding us showed no signs of movement. At some point Marcus had backed away into the darkness, his expression barely visible. I boldly approached Marcus and finally grabbed his shoulder. Hey, what the? Huh? The person I had cornered was completely black. It was a completely blackened Marcus. I couldn't make a sound and collapsed weakly, sitting down on the spot. How was it? The blackened figure spoke, though I couldn't tell where its mouth was. The eeriness of it made me nauseous. I could tell the two behind me were feeling the same way. Suddenly the black humanoid figure clutched its head and let out a scream. It didn't work. It didn't work at all. That voice was so horrifying, so otherworldly, that I felt frozen to my core with despair. At that moment, I sensed the cold presences around us beginning to move. Hey, let's get out of here. Derek slapped my shoulder and helped me stand up. Simon was already running, and Derek and I chased after him. The house gate that was right there felt impossibly far away. We somehow made it through the gate and desperately burst onto the road. At that moment, Marcus's scream echoed in my ear again, and my memory went blank. I woke up in a business hotel near the station. Checking my phone, I saw it was Sunday. The next day, nothing made sense, but I remembered exchanging contact information with Simon and Derek. I decided to try calling them. Both answered before even one ring could finish. When the three of us compared our experiences, we discovered we had all had exactly the same experience. We all lost our memories at exactly the same point, and all woke up in hotels we had apparently reserved. Just to be sure, we tried calling Marcus's house, but no one answered. The three of us decided to meet again, and go to Marcus's house. Surely nothing would be scary in broad daylight. We met at the station and walked there together. The other two had clearly lost their spirits since the night before. They spoke little and looked anxious. As we walked, I immediately noticed something wrong. The town's appearance was clearly different from yesterday. The candy store I had seen yesterday had become an ordinary house. The park had become an apartment building. The ramen shop had become a convenience store. The other two seemed confused as well. I went into the convenience store and asked the clerk, "How long has this store been here?" 6 years, they replied. I asked the manager as well, but got the same answer. They didn't seem to know anything about a ramen shop. The more we walked, the more confused we became. The townscape was completely different. Where had yesterday's town gone? Had we been seeing hallucinations? We couldn't reach any conclusions as we headed toward Marcus's house. When we arrived at Marcus's house, we stood there breathless with shock. There stood a burned ruin, apparently from a fire long ago, left exposed to the elements. We approached an elderly man nearby and spoke to him. "Excuse me, we'd like to ask about this house. Do you know anything about it?" "Huh? This house? Well, it's always been like this, hasn't it? These things happen, you know." "Haha." The old man laughed cheerfully without questioning his vague memory. We felt an indescribable uneasiness about him. That day we walked around various places, but ultimately learned nothing. Carrying these unsettled feelings, we decided to return home, since we had work the next day. What was all that about, anyway? Simon wondered. Seriously, makes no sense. Did we get transported to another world or something? Derek replied, "I wonder what happened to Marcus." When I mentioned Marcus's name, the two looked at me with puzzled expressions. "Huh? What? Who's Marcus?" Derek asked. "Was there a classmate with that name?" Simon added. "What? Marcus invited us all to get together. We were just talking about not being able to reach Marcus." "Sorry, I seriously don't know what you're talking about," Simon said. "Who invited us anyway?" "It wasn't Simon, so it must have been you. What are you trying to do, scare us?" Derek laughed. "What? Why don't you remember what we were just talking about? This isn't funny, even as a joke." "Just now? You mean the nostalgia tour thing? That name is seriously lame," Simon laughed. "No matter how many times I talked about Marcus after that, the two just said they didn't understand. In the end they looked at me strangely, and we parted ways with an awkward atmosphere. It seems I'm the only one who remembers that day or Marcus now. Looking through our graduation yearbook, Marcus wasn't anywhere to be found. Apparently, he never existed. I don't want to forget my memories of my youth, or that bizarre night. As a small act of resistance, I'm leaving this record here. I pray that my story will remain in someone's memory. But I have to ask you something. Have you ever had a friend that everyone else forgot? Someone who was there one day and gone the next, as if they never existed at all? Because sometimes I wonder, was Marcus ever real to begin with? Or was I the one who never existed? Think about it. Can you remember all your childhood friends? Are you sure they remember you?